Sculptor of Mary Seacole, and it's 10 years ago this month that I was commissioned. I wasn't the obvious choice, you might think. In fact, identity politics having grown so much in recent years, I might have been less likely to be commissioned now. I wasn't ethnically the same as Mary Seacole. Self-evidently, I wasn't a woman. And I certainly didn't have any nursing skills. In fact, if any of you start having chest pains from the delicious breakfast we've just had, there are many health professionals here, and I suggest the most important person you should turn to in that event is the lawyer Trevor Sterling. I'd spent my time making statues of elderly men in ill-fitting suits, people like me, or at least a bit like my father, old white poets. In fact, there's one just round the corner outside Broadcasting House of George Orwell. I didn't know much about the kind of compassionate but firm of purpose nurse, a bit like the old-fashioned image of the staff nurse, who Mary Seacole might be. Well, I'd heard something my father had described from his time lying in a hospital bed after he'd been blown up in the war, and that was that whenever a senior officer came into the room, he and his fellow patients had to do something called lying to attention. But that was a different matter. But in preparing a proposal for the monument 10 years ago, what had hit me square between the eyeballs was a passage in Mary Seacole's autobiography, where she talks about presenting herself at the residence of the Secretary at War, in the hope of being sent to Crimea, and she'd been completely ignored. She'd been stonewalled, largely on account of the colour of her skin. And that set me thinking, why don't we make that stone wall real and set it up in the monument? We all have some experience in our lives when people have made us feel like Mary did that day, that we just don't exist. What was important was to have her turning her back on that stone wall and marching defiantly away from it. And she's marching directly towards Parliament, over the river, towards the heart of the establishment. Both then and now, still marching, declaring not only that irrefutably she existed, but that she exists now gloriously, bringing with her all those who turn their backs on whatever stone walls are presented in their own lives, and who will declare unambiguously that they are here now and they will be counted. In the time since the sculpture's been put up, I've occasionally visited, not too often, because I always want to change my work a bit, make sure it actually does have 5 fingers and not 6 on each hand, move the foot a couple of inches or tilt the head slightly. We'd had to keep the spotlight that shines on the sculpture at night a little dim, in case it shone into the windows of Gassiot House behind it. I don't know how many of you know the building, corner of it there. It's very ugly. When we'd finally finished putting the sculpture up, I was asked if there was any final thing that could be done to make it perfect. I said demolish Gassiot House. I'm disappointed to see they haven't done that. But when I do occasionally visit, I'm always touched by how pleased people seem to be looking at it. It's as if there's a deep satisfaction that this first monument to a named woman of Afro-Caribbean heritage in Britain is so undeniably there, strong, bold, and present. And more than with any other monument I've made, the standard bearers of her legacy, the Mary Seacole Trust, have hit the ground running in the last 3 years, promoting an extraordinarily impressive range of diversity-related projects with the image of the statue flying like a banner over each one. This is how a monument should be used, not just as a glance back to the past, as some kind of full stop in history, but as the beginnings of something, a marker from which great things pour forth. I'm hugely impressed by the Mary Seacole Trust, and I'm grateful to you all here today for the honour of being included in your celebrations.